Record. So welcome everybody. I'm Kathy Kuntz. I'm the director of the Dane County Office of Energy and Climate Change, and I'm excited that you all could join us today for the webinar on accelerating solar. I am going to pull up our combined presentation and give you just a sense of sort of what's going on here today in terms of the agenda. So we're going to walk through pretty quickly stories from the Oregon School District, City of Madison, Middleton, Sun Prairie, Fitchburg. I'm going to talk a little bit about some research we've done around HOA covenants. Stacy will touch on Madison Group Buy resources, and then we're going to open it up for discussion. So our aim today is really to give our school districts and local governments a flavor for some of the folks who are moving fast in the solar arena and what they're learning, both in their own facilities and when they're facilitating things community-wide. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to our first speaker, who is Andy Weiland from the Oregon School District. Andy, take it away.
Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, so I was hoping to maybe just share a little bit of Oregon's story, how we built the largest net zero building, actually educational building in North America over the last couple of years. It's actually verified, so we were able to prove the concept out last September after a year of operation. And so far this year, we're actually continuing and doing actually better than last year as far as how we're following the model. So the story kind of starts years and years ago. This is actually my 22nd year in Oregon, and my first year that we were here, we actually built a intermediate school called Rome Corners. And we had hoped to do a geothermal school with that building back at that time, but we went and started exploring some situations and found something that didn't seem to be working as well as we had hoped. When our steam fitter board president put his hand on the boiler on a 50-degree day and it was running, we pretty well were sunk at that point in time. So we were in hibernation mode a little bit for renewable type things until probably in the early 2010s, when our board started to be more and more interested in things. We had a referendum in 2014, and there was a lot of desire to do something large. And how could we not increase the amount of carbon that we're putting into the atmosphere? And I promised the board at that time that a new school would be easier to do that with, but let's start slow and try to figure out these technologies. So in that referendum, we actually put in solar fields on, or put solar on the roofs of 3 schools, the largest one being around 130 kWps at our high school. So we kind of learned each time that we put it on different types of roof structures. We put it on a standing seam steel roof. We supported it off of a roof, and then we actually put it on the rubber membrane of the roof just to see the impacts of the differences. We also put geothermal on 2 of our buildings. They were both additional wings, but we wanted to learn about the technology related, how that technology worked too, and if there were any issues that we need to think about. Those installations went very, very well. We didn't have any problems. We were actually very happy with the amount of non-required maintenance associated with them. They just performed very well. And so when we needed a new elementary school, it just made sense that we combine those technologies, both the geothermal and the solar, into what we thought we could do is create the first net zero school in the state of Wisconsin, and we were able to do that. So we have over 1,700 solar panels on the building. It has the ability to power 645 kWps, but it's inverter clipped at 500. You guys all probably know what that means. So we kind of expand the parabola out on the power curve a little bit so that we can make more power, not necessarily have the investment into that last percent of the top of the parabola, but kind of widen it out a little bit to capture more power. And then we have a super efficient school, even though we have a tremendous amount of natural light that comes into the school. It is single loaded corridors, which means we have courtyards, and 3 different courtyards. You're looking at one of them in the middle of the page here. That's our kindergarten courtyard. So it's really hard to lose kindergartners in the building because they're kind of trapped in the middle of here. But then we also have an outdoor classroom courtyard as well as a growing courtyard for the building. That the building is used as kind of an educational experience in sustainability as well as just the building. So you can see on the right-hand picture here, myself in shorts with that very attractive mask looking at the graphic on the wall there. That's trying to show elementary kids how deep our geothermal wells go. So they go a little over 400 feet. Yep. And that's the state capitol turned upside down so that people can get an idea what that is, because most of our kids will see the state capitol obviously fairly often. And so they can envision that flipped upside down and know that those wells are actually about another 100 feet deeper than the height of the capitol. So doing those types of things is a way to both help kids understand what's going on. And the crazy thing is those wells are all underneath their playground. So you can kind of see on the top right-hand photo there, there's a little blue and red apparatuses in the bottom left-hand corner of that photo. That geothermal field is underneath that playground as well as the field above it. And there's some pavement that's below it a little bit. So that's where they get to play every day, several times a day, is on top of those geothermal fields. The solar it's kind of interesting. If you come up to the building, you would not know that there's anything overly special about the building. It's very beautiful, but there's no big sign that says we're net zero. You can't even see the solar cells from it unless you're on the second story. So you see all the solar from obviously an aerial shot, but if you just drove up to the building, you wouldn't even know until you got to the second floor, and then you can see on the first floor that all the solar cells are there. So I always at times have thought about maybe we should have put like a solar flower out in the middle of the courtyard or something so that people understood how the building's actually powered. Even though it wouldn't produce the amount of power that we need, it would be good advertisement. So, and then the left photo here that we're showing, I think this was from a bike event that we had at the school. Basically, this is MG&E's, shows you how much power we use compared to how much power we produce. So the blue is the light blue greenish color there on the chart is kind of the amount of power we're producing. And yellow is how much power we're importing. So obviously, if you take the blue and you add it together and you compare it to all the yellow added together, the blue would be a little bit larger than the yellow by about 24 megawatts. So we exceeded the need for the building by about that much this last September through August. So, and we are on track to beat that this next year, depending on how the next couple months go. So winter was actually fairly mild for us. I'm sure it was for you as well. And so we're doing very, very well. Other than that, the technologies, I like to tell people, and you all probably know, the technologies are pretty simple. Geothermal is hidden away in the ceilings for the most part. I have to take people into the the pump room essentially, so that people can see what a geothermal pump looks like, or I'm sorry, a heat pump looks like, that heat and cool the space. Otherwise, they're hidden away and nobody really sees them. We do have a small room where we can see the pipes coming in from the ground and some pressure and temperature gauges so that they can look at them. But other than that, the building it operates extremely well. We do have some advanced technologies in it. When I say advanced, we have a system that actually shades the windows when we get direct sunlight so that we can keep that heat out of the building during those times of the year that we don't want to heat the building up, as well as an advanced lighting control system, which basically can measure how much light is in the rooms and dim the lights, which are all LED, obviously, so that we aren't using as much energy as we can. Because like I said, there's a tremendous amount of natural light in the building. It doesn't need to have the lights on all the time. Just looking at my other notes here, big thing that I wanted to stress as I kind of wind up is building is all electric. So there is no combustible fuels on the building or in the building. The only thing we did had to add was we had to have a little snow blower in order to clear the areas, the paths, and we're still using gas for that. But otherwise, the kitchen is all electric. The hot water heater system is all electric. Everything in the building is electric. So the calculations for figuring out if it's net zero is very simple. I like to use the analogy that I can use a fifth grader. They can take 12 energy bills, and if I show them which numbers to add up, they can add up the amount of energy used compared to the energy sold back to the utility, and pretty simply see that the energy produced is larger than the energy that is used. So very simple in order to do that. I love that analogy because so many of these programs, which are all good programs out there, to do different types of things, you have to hire somebody to do that. And on a month-to-month basis, I can prove that the buildings are performing optimally and doing what it's supposed to. So I love that part of it. I don't have that with all my other buildings. So with that, I'll close.
Awesome. Thank you, Andy. And we're gonna, folks should feel free to put questions in the chat, but our plan will be to sort of address them at the end. With that, I'm going to switch over to Stacy Reese from the City of Madison.
Hi there. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today. So I'm going to share a little bit on the City of Madison's journey for renewable energy. And I guess the biggest takeaway I would say from our journey is that we're trying a lot of different things, and we're here to share out what we've learned along the way to make it easier for everyone else to jump right in. And so our journey with renewables happened, we've been doing a lot of solar installations for quite some time, but really what accelerated our ability to move towards renewables was passing a resolution setting a goal for 100% renewable energy, net zero carbon. That was passed in 2017. And from that, we had a report that was issued called the 100% Renewable Madison Report. And I highly encourage checking that out. I can send out links afterwards, but please feel free to copy paste, right? Take this report, apply it to your own municipality and community. And on the right-hand side is our current sort of donut. This is moving, but I wanted to kind of share all the different pieces of this puzzle to get us to 100%. Next slide. So the first portion I'm going to speak to is that blue piece of the pie, which we call our behind the meter or phase one. So that's our own city-owned behind the meter solar installations, either roof installed or ground mounted. We've been doing, we have about 30 plus installations since 2008. So we were kind of at a clip of about 3 per year, which that kind of split up between 2/3 being done in-house by our engineering operations team and 1/3 being bid out through public works or subcontracted. So thinking a little bit about like a new construction of a library or fire station, we would just have that as a layer subcontracted out. We started a program in 2016 called the Green Power Trainee Program, where we bring on individuals underserved from our community to learn the trades of solar. We started that in 2016, and they then were part of that 2/3 of the in-house installation crew. In 2020, we hit a milestone of 1 megawatt of installed capacity with those around 30 plus installations. Again, those are city owned, so those are dollars coming from our capital budget. And we also leaned heavily on our focus on energy partnerships for those incentive dollars to offset some of that cost. And just to speak a little bit, if you want to look back at the donut chart, it's 2%. And I think what's really important to note is that if we want to get to 100%, and we've been doing a clip about 3 per year, And we about 10 years later, we've gotten 2%. You can imagine that our goal of achieving 100% renewable energy by 2030 will not be met strictly with rooftop. And it's just the nature of the beast of our city operations. If it's building load, you can do some solar, but you are restricted on the amount you can build out based on the net metering rules. And then we have things that aren't building load, thinking about streetlights, traffic signals, pumping stations, sewer lifts. A lot of those have heavy electricity load, but don't have the square footage surface area of a rooftop to then have a solar installation offset that electricity load. So I think the first step really is to really understand your load, your electricity load. Is it buildings? Is it auxiliaries? And thinking about sort of where there's opportunities for rooftop and where maybe we need to look at other options. Next slide. So now we're moving into what we call phase 2 of the behind the meter. So we're going from 1 crew to 2 crews, potentially 3 crews if we can hire an electrician this year. And we are then going to be doubling our solar installations, hopefully getting from 3 per year to getting to more towards 6. And again, those will still be split, the majority happening from our in-house crews with our green power trainees, and then some being bid out. This green power trainee program is also expanding in the off season. We're having them stay on year round so they can help with some of our energy efficiency projects during the winter time, such as our LED retrofits. Again, we want to bring down our electricity load so we have less solar needs in the long run, as well as some of our electric vehicle infrastructure. So with that projection, we're looking at doing our 2nd megawatt in the next year or so, and then we're trying to get to a clip where we can do 1 megawatt per year going forward. So that, if you look back over at the donut chart, that's going to be that orange slice of approximately 10%. So that's, again, a very aggressive, increase to our capital budget, increase in hiring and some of the other needs around that that are still challenging. I mentioned before, we're still looking to hire an electrician. So with that, again, we're going to hit a certain portion of our electricity load, but there's a wide swath of that remaining donut that we need to address. And I didn't include a slide on this, but the next portion, the gray portion, is your utility. So we always want to include how much of our utility has renewable in their source mix, the resource mix. And this is an older number. It's from 2016. I wasn't able to find an updated number on MGE's website, but they had about 12% in 2016. We know that they've done a fair amount of utility scale solar purchases, such as Badger Hollow in the southwest portion of Wisconsin. So we know that that number is increasing. So also taking into consideration the utility mix within your electricity load. We do also have Alliance Energy in our territory on the west side of Madison. Again, it's a very small sliver that wouldn't even be visible in this donut. So we did not include that, but they also have renewable energy as part of their resource mix. That being said, they also have different rules around net metering. They have a more limited amount for solar development in Alliant territory because of their net metering rules. All right, next slide. All right, so we have to start thinking a little bit bigger than rooftop. Rooftop is part of the picture. It's an all of the above approach. So, in the state of Wisconsin, there are some limitations on what we can do, but what some utilities are looking into is offering a product for a utility scale solar farm or renewable energy farm. And so Madison Gas and Electric released this product or program a few years ago called the Renewable Energy Rider Program. Hat tip to Dane County, who's jumped into the fray with their airport project. We also know that Fitchburg has the O'Brien solar fields, and then Middleton also at their airport have participated in the renewable energy rider programs. We've got a lot of friends around the table that we can all kind of share out our experiences because we all kind of went about it one-to-one. And so we all have different experiences, but because Dane County has been operational for a year, Middleton, we now have data that we can look at to see sort of the outcomes of these projects. For City of Madison, our project is almost operational. They said March 31st, it might be electrified. Yay. But that's, it's an 8 megawatt solar field on the southeast side of Madison. We're off taking 5 megawatts of that 8 megawatts, and then the Madison Metropolitan School District will be taking the remaining 3 megawatts. So it's considered what's a sleeve tariff. And basically what that means is they have certain qualifying commercial meters. So those are usually the high use commercial meters. They kind of wrap them all into one sleeve on paper, and then they associate that with this solar array. So those solar arrays are going to be associated with those meters and accounts. This is a 30-year contract. What's great about it is there's no upfront capital costs. This is different than our behind the meter rooftop solar arrays, where we're not actually asking for dollars in our budget, but we are kind of locked in with some rates. So there is a risk to return projection there that needs to be understood. So again, I put question marks there because we haven't seen our data come through yet, but we are really excited. And like I said, we're really just grateful to have other partners around the table here in Dane County that we can kind of share out information. And that's the goal of this Sustainability Leaders Collaborative, is that we can do some of these things, share out what we've learned so that others can take advantage of these opportunities. All right, so that's going to be that on the donut side of the page here. It's about 19% offloading or offsetting our electricity load. And next slide. All right, so this was another project that we did. It was kind of an exciting project because it was a big project. There was a multi-stakeholder partnership looking to go all in on a portfolio of solar arrays throughout Wisconsin and Minnesota. The grand portfolio is 10 arrays. Partners around the table included Dr. Bronner's Soap, Cliff Bar, Organic Valley Co-op, and City of Madison. And what it was we wanted to be basically at the table to basically help be an investor towards solar arrays being built in rural Wisconsin and Minnesota. City of Madison, we are participating in 5 of those 10 arrays in rural Wisconsin. You can see in the map there. And these are what are called unbundled RECs, or renewable energy credits. And what that means by unbundled is that the electrons from those solar arrays are going to those municipal utilities right next to those arrays. And then those electrons are then going to their municipal utility customers. Now, the renewable energy credits are being unbundled from those electrons. And renewable energy credits are basically the environmental attributes of a renewable energy project. The way that the City of Madison did this is that we offered to then pay for those 5 arrays over 5 years. Within those 5 years, they are transferring the remaining renewable energy credits from each remaining array. So just to kind of break that down a little bit, year 1, we paid for 1 array for the entire life of that array. And those remaining 4, we paid for just the quarterly transfers. And then the next year we paid for that second array and the remaining 3, and then down the road, so that at the end of the 5 years, we're done making payments, but we have the remaining 25 years of those solar arrays producing renewable energy, and for us to be receiving those renewable energy credits. Some of the things around renewable energy credits that were really important when we were setting our goals of 100% was that we wanted to make sure there was additionality. And additionality just means that it's a new renewable energy resource on the grid. There are marketplaces for renewable energy credits out there for 10-year-old solar farms in South Dakota and in Texas. We wanted new renewable energy on the grid. We know how important it is to build out the renewable energy future of our grid. So that was one of the sort of the check boxes that need to be checked. The other one was sort of a geographical nearby, as close to Madison, Dane County as possible. So that's why we participated in the 5 arrays in Wisconsin and not the ones in Minnesota. And then also the but-for clause. This was, we were kind of negotiating this around, I want to say 2017, 2018, and that's when tariff prices were going up for solar arrays as well as steel prices. And so the cost was increasing to construct these solar arrays. And so by City of Madison entering into this agreement, we were able to offer those investment dollars to make this project go. So that's another thing that's, I think, some of these checkboxes might be important when thinking about going out there and looking for some of these large scale projects. And so just looking on the left-hand side of the donut, that's going to be 37% of our electricity load offset. We do have actually in our 100% renewable Madison report, we do actually have a limitation or a sort of a ceiling or a threshold for how much we want to use renewable energy credits towards our goal, because there is this, I would say, balance, with the levers that you want to pull. You don't want to go all in on renewable energy credits. You could, they're one of the most least cost options out there. But at the same time, we want to also provide actual nuts and bolts in our own backyard for renewable energy resources. And so before I get to the next page, I just want to point out that we still have, with all of these sort of adventures in renewable energy, we still have this chunk left over, that green chunk of the donut, that is fossil combusted fuels sources and this is just electricity. So this is sort of our next sort of, step forward, is how to take that next 20% and figure that piece out. So next slide. So this is a little bit of a projection that we have. Again, this is just a different way to look at that donut graph over time. You can see that, we started out mostly with our, the green power from the grid was the majority up until most recently. You can see in 2020, we had that bump that was from our renewable energy credits purchases. And then you can see in 2022, hopefully by the end of this month, that little rust brown color will be our renewable energy rider. And you can see over time, to take into consideration the green power from the grid. But that being said, you can see how these chunks kind of layer out. We've also included in this graph weatherization, retro commissioning, equipment upgrades, and LED retrofits to our streetlights. So these are all various layers in here, but you can kind of see the level for which each of these can play a part. However, that being said, with our current electricity use, a 2% growth of consumption, and an assumption on the greening of the grid, we are still short of reaching our 100% goal by 2030. So again, this is something that is a nut that we need to still crack. And I would also just emphasize, just after seeing the Oregon School District and their net zero school, there's going to be a huge opportunity to electrify our buildings, and that's going to increase our grid load and needs for electrification. And, the city of Madison, we've been, aggressively electrifying our fleet. We have the first electric fire truck in the US, and that is an extreme amount of electricity load that we now also have to continually account for. So that goal that we set in 2030 or in 2017 with the report that was released, that number is those goalposts will continue to move forward. So it's not a one and done once we figure out 100%, but will be a nice goal to hit eventually. Next slide. And this is just my final slide. This is from the EPA Green Power Partnership website, and there's a link there for their green power markets. On the right-hand side is just all of these are all the organizations that have applied to be a green power partner with this EPA program, and you can see the breakdown, again, of all these different products that are out there, and you can see RECs are that light blue. A lot of organizations are looking for renewable energy credits. There are some of these color-coded bars that we cannot do here in the state of Wisconsin. So that is, like, for instance, our physical PPAs are not allowable here in the state of Wisconsin. So we are limited. We are trying to achieve 100% with one arm tied behind our back a little bit. That being said, one thing that we are investigating for that final chunk is a financial PPA or a virtual PPA. So we are in the early stages of looking into that with some of our schools throughout the University of Wisconsin system, some of the technical colleges, and some other communities. So if you are interested in learning more about what a financial or virtual PPA is, please let me know. And my final word is, on the picture on the lower left, is to really approach your renewable energy journey like you would any other investment portfolio. Not to put all your eggs in one basket, to think of it as a diverse portfolio of solutions. And it is an all of the above approach. And with that, I'm done.
Awesome. Thank you, Stacy. And we will zip right on to Middleton. Kelly.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'll just dive right in. The picture in this first slide is a picture of the Middleton utility-owned solar array at our airport. And that was energized in 2020 and provides 5 megawatts of solar energy to MGE, who then sells shares to customers in their feeder district. And from that solar array, the city of Middleton purchased an RER with an RER agreement, 1/2 megawatt of that power, and the school district also purchased 1 megawatt of power. So that helps our community meet some of its renewable energy goals. One of MGE's first shared solar utility-owned solar arrays was also in Middleton. Back, I think in 2016, they put a 1/2 megawatt solar array on our Middleton Operations Center. And the city didn't purchase any of that at that time, but people in the community did buy into the shares. Next slide, please. So there's been several things that I feel like in Middleton have really accelerated our solar and our renewable energy portfolio. I think having our 100% renewable energy resolution is probably the biggest thing that really set us on a path to making good arguments at council to promote solar, both for the city and also in the larger community. And one way we have moved forward is, I think, quite inventive because of our planning department and Abby Attoon, who worked on this with the financial director for several years. We have a tax increment financing policy that heavily promotes and incentivizes a number of sustainability attributes on all of our TIF projects. We have 3 TIF districts, and our TID 3 district is one of the most successful in the state. There's just been so much development in that district, and there's been a lot of added value brought to Middleton. And a lot of the solar that goes on these buildings in the TIF districts, a lot of that's really worked out at the negotiating table between Abby and the financial director and the developers. And so I think one thing that's come out of that is not only do we get the solar projects on these bigger buildings in our industrial district, but then those developers, they do it once, they see the paybacks coming in, and then they put solar on other developments that may not be incentivized in outside of the TIF districts. So we have developers who are building elsewhere in Middleton that are continuing to do solar because they've sort of learned and they were taken through the process during the TIF process of requesting funding. We have developer financed tax increment financing help in Middleton. And over the last few years, we've been able to incentivize over 1.5 megawatts of solar PV over 11 TID projects. So that's been one of the bigger things, and we're hoping to renew, or I should say, rewrite the TIF policy a bit to make it even more strongly worded, so that we might be able to have some leverage with developers in our TIF districts to require solar on all the buildings. Okay, next slide, please. And then for city-owned solar, we got kind of a late start on that, but we're pushing ahead. And so far we have 5 projects that are energized. Our Terrace Pavilion is right downtown and was energized way back in like 2013 or 14. And then the Middleton Police Department has a 100 kilowatt array on its roof, and that was part of the deal for putting on the utility-owned solar as a first project on our Middleton Operations Center. So we don't own that solar right now, but we will purchase that solar in 2024. But right now it is producing power and offsetting energy use at the police department. And then just this last year, we did 3 solar projects on our EMS building, our Lakeview Park Shelter, and our Middleton Operations building, separate from the utility-owned solar. We also have a city-owned solar array on that building now as well. And those 3 projects were funded through the closeout of a state revolving loan fund. And we were able to allocate $300,000 of that revolving loan fund a few years ago for city-owned solar in Middleton. And when we bid the project as a 3-building project, and the cost was $224,000 for those 3 arrays. And then we got a really nice focus on energy rebate of $54,000. So that really cut the costs on putting city-owned solar on our buildings. And the remaining amount of money from that original $300,000 revolving loan fund we're using towards EV infrastructure now this next year. Like Stacy says, we're trying to diversify our renewable energy and ways of bringing down our carbon emissions. And then in the next year, in 2022, we have 5 more solar projects slated. 2 of them on the water utility pumps will be funded from the ARPA federal funds, the American Recovery Plan Act. And I think that we were able to promote those and get those through council because we had an energy plan that was written in conjunction with 6 other Dane County municipalities. And in that energy plan, Slipstream was our consultant, and they wrote out some of the best places for solar, and they identified well pump 6 and 8. And so having solar embedded in your documents, your energy plan, sustainability, your comprehensive plan, that's so important, because when you go to make a case to council, it helps to obviously have the payback and the financials, but it's also goals that have been set by our community. We have political and social capital promoting sustainability and renewable energy in our city. And that's been really important when we lay out our case for why we request any kind of budget for solar. So those water utility pumps are funded through ARPA. And then we did a request capital budget for the golf course clubhouse. And we have a bit of a donation for a small array at Stonehorse Green, which is a new public plaza in the heart of Middleton that's going to be built on a pavilion there. And then we're adding battery storage at the police department array at the 100 kilowatt system so that we can run a small microgrid with the generator that exists there. And then we can keep critical infrastructure running in the event of a power outage at the police department. So I'm really excited about that project moving forward. Next slide, please. So this photo is actually a picture of my parents' house, and they put solar on last year, and it covers 100% of their electricity in their home. And I think one question we're always asking as staff, but also as a sustainability committee in Middleton, is how to expand solar community-wide. It takes so much of my time and capacity to work on these city projects that I feel like I'm sort of missing the boat on promoting solar more community-wide. And there are so many resources I feel like as a sustainability coordinator, I could be offering the community to get to jumpstart some of their, answer some of their questions, get it going more. And, solar group buys are a great way to start. We've promoted that a bit, but I don't feel like I've ever truly done it right and as well as I could. With Legacy Solar Co-op is one, and Renew Madison program is a great one. So we have some really good options for that. We just need to find a way to really let the community know about them. And then the American Rescue Plan Act has been another funding source for us. We're planning on doing affordable, naturally occurring affordable housing energy efficiency retrofits in this next year, but that will include solar on 2 to 3 buildings for the next 3 years each. So hopefully close to 10 buildings will have solar, residential buildings, and those will be smaller buildings, like 2, 3, 4 unit buildings. But in Middleton, as in all of Dane County, we have a housing crisis and housing shortage, but it's really important to us that we try to maintain the already naturally occurring affordable housing so that people still have affordable places to live here, but they also can benefit from electrification projects and solar and reap the savings from that. We have a grant in right now for at the Office of Energy Innovation for a project doing beneficial electrification on a subsidized housing unit in Middleton. And that grant would go towards battery storage and solar. So that work is continuing on. It's just, I feel like now a lot of our community work involves a more complex array of community partnerships. We're working with Middleton Outreach Ministries, MOM, we're working with Kiwanis, Elevate Energy, Sustain Dane, a lot of different community groups coming together to first see how we can do basic energy efficiency work, but then how to use grants and other funding sources to put some solar on all of these more community buildings, residential, but also some of the community buildings. And then the future, what I hope that we can start working on is net zero building guidelines. And because we're constrained from the state legislature of requiring anything that exceeds building codes, we can't require everyone to put solar on or to do net zero, but we do have some leverage in our TIF districts. We can tie net zero building to build net zero energy to TIF incentives. And also when we rezone anything, we can also have some leverage there to require solar or require net zero energy. So that's how we're looking forward. And I think, next slide, please. The last thing I'll say is it really has been important to write all of these goals into our set of plans that the city uses. And we have, some challenges ahead of us. For me in the city, with city-owned solar, one thing that's been difficult is the bidding process and understanding how to split the design from the build, which we're required to do by state statute. So in some ways that makes it less efficient the way the solar industry works. So I'm still navigating how to write specifications for the bid documents. So if anyone has any information on that, how you've done it in your cities, that would be great to share. It gets a little difficult for solar installers to work around that when they have to split their design and build up. And then, yeah, I think, just working through some of the politics at the state as well, like third-party financing and some things that haven't been resolved will help us accelerate solar even more. So that's all I'll say for now. I have my contact information on the next slide if this slide deck is shared.
Thanks, Kelly. And we will send this out. And of course, we'll have the recording too. Terrific. Okay, we're going to move from Middleton to Sun Prairie. Scott.
All right, thank you all for joining us. I will cover where the city of Sun Prairie is today and also where we plan to head. So right now, we currently have 2 solar PV systems installed and operational. The first one is at our City Hall location. That's 81.6 kWp roof-mounted system. As you can see at City Hall downtown, it's a co-located facility. So there's a lot of different city services, including our police station, administrative services, and walk-in desks. So there are a lot of different features there. Similarly to Middleton, we're looking at microgrid capabilities and controls. We have an emergency operations facility located there. So as a backup generation resource, they could potentially be islanded. That's something we're looking at now. This system has been operational since about the end of 2018. And what's really interesting to me for this one is during the procurement and specification process, we actually, typically my thinking through all this is you would want to tackle energy efficiency first, then look at renewable assets on the facility, and then look at credits, the renewable energy credits we spoke about. However, this facility, we're working this year now to install LED. And I mention that because of the opportunity here. We needed a roof replacement back in late 2018. So the thinking behind this and the specifications in the bid process is we needed to replace the roof, and we also included the solar PV, and you'll see actually in the bottom that green strip, that is a green roof section of City Hall as well. We included alternative bids for this system. So we were able to install solar PV renewable generation. We haven't done all the energy efficiency things we wanted to do in the facility, but just the opportunistic nature of where that building's design was and the need for a 30-year roof replacement project that will now last for the life of the building, hopefully, will also coincide with installing that solar at the same time. So I mention that because of the different opportunities that present themselves in different timelines and our ability to capitalize on those or not. We actually ended up going with both that solar PV system and the green roof as well. So it was harder to calculate some of the energy savings associated with the green roof in general. There are HVAC savings associated with keeping heat from permeating the building, but when you compare it to a solar PV system that can generate revenue, is a different calculation to look at. So that was our first foray into solar PV, and so far those systems, the public monitoring portals are online and linked here, so you can see those production values over time, and we monitor those to see how they're doing. The second system you see on the right here is our West Side Community Building. That's a 120.6 kWp roof mount system. Kind of a similar situation there. The section you're seeing on the north side of the building was an expansion. So the original building was in 2006. I believe the expansion was done around 2017. And that was a very similar situation where in the construction specifications for what is also a co-located facility, we actually have our Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Department, our police station, and our fire EMS at this facility. So a lot of different things happening here, and that need for different services facilitated the expansion. And during that construction bid process, we also included solar. So these systems, the West Side building's about a third larger. These buildings use about the same electricity consumption, and that West Side building was another good opportunity to put in solar when the timing was right. We still have some efficiency upgrades to do with this building, some controls and systems that were original to that 2006 original installation, but that do serve the entire facility. So it's an interesting dynamic of when you can put in solar and how, and when the opportunities arrive, and when you do efficiency first, or there's an opportunity to install. And I also took this picture with our Parks Recreation staff about a week or two ago. Obviously, we have a lot of snow. What's interesting to me is some of the operations and maintenance components we need to be thinking of, and our facilities maintenance staff, the education and training that goes into some of these newer systems, and making sure that they're familiar with the different alerts, and that goes back to the monitoring systems and making sure our assets are performing the way we'd expect, and that we have them serviced regularly and all the good things that are going on, because they can actually help with the roof life depending on how they're mounted and things of that nature. They could also, if they're not mounted properly, hurt your roof life if there's a penetration or things are not going as planned. So you always want to be watching these systems' different performance and making sure that we're on top of things. So these are our existing systems today. I'm also excited to share with you on the next slide here our big plans at our wastewater treatment facility. So a couple things with this one. This is our wastewater treatment facility campus. We are planning to do in the range of a 350 to 400 kilowatt ground mount system. We've made some pretty significant capacity upgrades to this facility. Our city is growing quickly. We have a lot of wastewater infrastructure needs, capacity, gallons of water per day treated. So the intent here is as this facility grows and expands, we also want to be mindful of our energy consumption. This wastewater treatment plant is the single largest energy user in the entire city, second to our street lights. So this is obviously a high opportunity impact area of focus of us. So we're looking at a large solar ground mount system. We've actually been exploring some of the different options here. Kelly had mentioned the procurement process, and that's a very important piece of all this. And when we're scoping out design, there are even new systems now that are earth mounted, not ground mounted, but actually affixed flat to the earth. I just found out about them recently, and they might be a pretty good candidate for this location. We're also looking at ground mount systems that might be raised at a higher racking height so that we could do agrivoltaics and grow crops or put a community garden under the actual solar fields. We have a wetland abutting this location just on the west side of this facility here. What are the opportunities there with preserving green space? We also produce biogas at this facility, so there are opportunities with cogeneration and looking at microgrids again for this critical operations facility. And I'll also mention what is going to be a massive undertaking planning project in that first bullet, is this is the site of our future public works campus. So I keep talking about co-location. We're going to be including all of our public works operational services. That's snow plowing, that's all, you name it. The critical services of what public works does in our community will now be at this facility. In addition to, at the bottom right, you'll see that little blue roof mount. That's actually our fleet maintenance facility. So well, in the future, in about 2027, 2028, we will have wastewater, our fleet maintenance facility, and our public works campus all in this one location. There's an incredible opportunity to look at net zero campus approaches and putting in cogeneration, and how do we use our biogas that's produced on site. And that all does tie into this solar PV system. So as we're looking at these different technologies, we also want to be mindful in that design if it is expansion ready system, if it's something where we can perhaps put in just the ground mounts and consider putting in future solar PV as well. And I'm seeing the question about agrivoltaics. That would be co-locating agricultural activities and solar PV generation. So for example, if you were to mount the system higher off the ground, you could potentially grow crops, smaller things of that nature, productive community gardens, things of that nature, and actually putting them under the shaded region of the solar PV system. So that's the trade-off that we're constantly trying to figure out, is if we were to create an earth mount system or a roof mount system, we wouldn't have that opportunity. So a lot of this is analysis and different trade-offs and seeing, yes, what the system can produce, but what else can we do with this space that we have available for us. So a really exciting project that we're in the design phase for now, and that will take a course of 5 to 7 years to really figure out and get all the details down. But as we're also talking about fleet electrification and heat pump installation, my other peer presenters mentioned this electrification will increase our electric load. So we have to keep that in mind as well when we're looking at a campus approach and what that means. And are we parking vehicles here? Do we have EV charging? Is it being fed by the solar? There's I'm sure a few more questions than that, but that's the kind of thing we're looking at. Next slide, please. And so what I have here is the process. I'm sure many municipalities will recognize this right away, and it is grossly simplified, but I mention this because of the nuance in installing these projects and walking us through how do we get to solar on our facilities or in our communities. And for the city of Sun Prairie, for many other municipalities, there are many, many steps. And I mentioned all these different design questions and thinking through the process, and the planning up front is just critical. So as we're walking through all of this, we first identify a project. We then work with our finance department and the various departments to include it in our CIP, which is the capital improvement plan. That has to be approved, reviewed, approved by city council. So then we're at a point where we can say, let's install a system. We agree that we've budgeted for it and we can install it on our facility. Next, we need to obtain quotes. Something Kelly pointed out is design and construction are separate services. So we have to find ways to either create an owner's agent contractual obligation where they provide those design services, and we can then use those specifications in the construction solicitation. But those quotes are important because you need to get multiple quotes to ensure you're getting a cost-effective project and that you're looking at the various trade-offs. Then once the project's budgeted, there's going to be change orders, there's going to be decisions on those various trade-offs I mentioned. Is it ground mount or is it earth mounted? Is it providing agrivoltaics, or what's the total building load today? Are we adding electric vehicle charging and we need a bigger system and therefore a larger budget? So what's the flexibility in the budget with competing needs, that sort of thing? Then you have a design process. You have the RFP where you're soliciting these different bids. You award the RFP, you go through a lengthy contracting process, and then finally you're at that step number 7, you're installing and activating the system, and that leads you to getting this. So there are just many, many steps involved, even when it comes to installing solar on our own facilities. And they're mostly there for a reason. It's important to do the due diligence, but it takes so much upfront planning. And again, these other communities that have spoken mention putting this in their sustainability plans, mentioning this in the budgeting and procurement process. It's critical to embed this stuff in the beginning and getting buy-in from the community and saying, this is what we want and why. Because once you're at steps 4 or 6 and you have a roof project and you haven't budgeted for solar PV, it's perhaps a missed opportunity because you don't have the pieces in place to make the project happen. So I call out this process as a very straightforward in the steps, but not necessarily in the implementation, where we're really looking for our communities and our residents, our business stakeholders to demonstrate that buy-in on how we get a project to move forward. So there are many moving pieces to these. Next slide, please. So finally, I'll talk about our plan systems and our next steps. I think importantly in this, I'll mention that Sun Prairie, unlike some of the other municipalities, has a municipal electric utility. That's Sun Prairie Utilities. That Sun Prairie Utilities is also a joint member owner of an organization called WPPI Energy. And why that's different is that we have more of a, I'll call it a direct relationship. So there are associations with the city's budget and approvals. The electric utility is still needs to submit rates and things like that to the Public Service Commission, but we are more closely integrated as a municipal entity. And that does provide us some good opportunities when we're looking at our facilities and our electric usage and our different programs, as opposed to something like MG&E or Alliant. We have different tools and different programs available to us as a result of that. So if any attendees are part of a municipal utility or specifically WPPI, you might have some different incentives or different programs available to you compared to what you've seen. So I'll mention some of the new construction projects we're looking at this year. That quote I have, the Strategic Sustainable Task Force recommendation report we had was a recommendation was to install one or more municipal solar PV projects per year. And we've really been looking at our opportunities to doing that. We have a lot of new construction coming up in the near future. We're creating a new Sun Prairie Utilities facility. The plan is to have solar on that. We are renovating and expanding our public library. We're also awarded a grant for that one to do a microgrid feasibility study. So in addition to what's currently a 100 kWp system we're looking at for the library, could it be a community resiliency center? Does it have backup power? Can we island it and provide critical services in the event of an emergency? So our public library renovation and expansion, our public works campus, I mentioned that one already. That's a huge opportunity for us. And then our other existing buildings as well. Similarly to what I mentioned with City Hall, there's a roof replacement coming up in our fire EMS station #1. So working through that process I had detailed and getting that into our capital improvement plan, budgeting, and then going through the process of that design install. And then the last piece, I haven't talked a lot about community efforts, but one thing we are looking at is a National Renewable Energy Lab tool called Solar App Plus. We currently use OpenGov as a software that tries to digitize a lot of our city services. So if you want to apply for a permit, things of that nature, you can use our resources online to streamline what used to be a physical paper process or a permitting process. So this NREL tool is meant to expedite the residential solar PV installation process. So we're working with our building inspection department that solar installers on residential, and I believe commercial, but primarily residential properties would be able to turn over their specifications and project plan in a digital format to this tool. It does a very rapid analysis. It provides a quick kind of a check mark to our building inspection department that this project has met all the appropriate certifications, guidelines, codes, and that it is ready for permit approval. So the idea here is to use software to allow and enable faster permitting of renewable energy projects in residential communities. And then a lot of the resources that have already been shared are available as well, and constantly communicating those to our residents and businesses, working with our utility. Again, that's a great opportunity for us to engage with the community and make sure they're available and they know all these resources. And we're also using that Choose Renewable program that WPPI has, that is that renewable energy credit purchase program for us. So with that, that's kind of our plan right now. We're working towards similarly these clean renewable electricity goals for our city operations. So I'm excited to see what comes of that in the near future. And again, thank you for the time. I appreciate folks hearing about what we're doing at Sun Prairie.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. We will shift to Fitchburg. Phil.
Thanks, Kathy. I think we're running a little behind, so I'll try to make this quicker than my 10 minutes. We'll see if I can do it.
You're okay. You're okay. I planned for this.
Okay, great. Of course, you're on top of it. So like all of the other communities going before us, I think there's going to be a lot of redundancy here talking about Fitchburg has also invested a pretty good amount in renewable energy, specifically in solar energy. The city has, at this point, one of my big goals is actually building a sustainability plan for Fitchburg. We still don't have one, unlike a number of our neighbors, but still the city has really put a lot of effort into reducing its energy footprint over the last decade and a half. And that's credited to, we have a really strong resource conservation commission that for well over a decade has prioritized a number of sustainability initiatives. The city has invested in a sustainability specific position for several years now, which has really made a big difference in pushing a lot of these initiatives. And also a number of them just make good business sense. They're good economic moves. And I think the city has wisely recognized that and invested in things when the opportunity arises. So back in 2009, 2010, Fitchburg partnered with our utility, our primary utility, Madison Gas and Electric, on a couple of 10-year contracts on some ground-mounted solar on our property. And those contracts have expired now. That solar is now just integrated fully into MG&E's grid, and we're no longer getting credit for it. But in the meantime, we have the 3 yellow stars on this map that correlate with the 3 pictures in the top right to some degree. In 2017, we had a large 360 kilowatt municipal rooftop solar array installed. So you can see the top picture there is our city hall that has a pretty large solar PV array, as well as some solar water heating sticking up on the top of the roof. Just below it to the right on the same civic campus is our library that has over 100 kilowatt array on its roof as well. Unfortunately, you can't see it from this ground view. But then also just to the bottom left of that is our public works maintenance building that also has a pretty sizable array that provides, I believe, over 70% right now of its electricity. So a lot of this ends up actually on lower usage days sold back to MG&E, but we're producing 8% of the municipality's electricity just from those 3 buildings. Plus, we also included the top left star on the map there is our second newest fire station that also has a sizable array on its roof. We then in 2019 created a new fire station. That red star and the red picture on the bottom right there is our east fire station that has another over 100 kilowatt array on its roof. Great drone photo provided here. And all of these together produce nearly 10% of our electricity, and that also utilizes a sizable majority of our available rooftop space. So as has been alluded to here, there's only so far you can go with rooftop solar. You have to start looking into ground-mounted solar, renewable energy credits, things like that. We do also have 100% renewable electricity resolution that was passed by council back in 2019. So we're looking for other opportunities to reduce our footprint. And one of these came along as Stacy and Kelly both alluded to with their talks with the O'Brien solar farm that MG&E and EDF Renewables partnered on. That would be the blue star there where South Seminole and Lacey Road meet, and that large picture in the bottom there. This is a 20 megawatt array that MG&E and EDF partnered on that just went live last summer. Fitchburg is purchasing essentially a half a megawatt of solar capacity. In reality, we're buying 1/40th of whatever's produced. But that provides another roughly 20% of our electricity. So already just from these solar projects in Fitchburg's city boundaries, we're getting close to 30% of our electricity needs met for the municipality through solar electricity, which is all fantastic. Oh, and one other thing, Scott, you mentioned the agrivoltaics. That's something that EDF was working on with this O'Brien solar farm. They're actually looking to planning on a pretty sizable pollinator-friendly array of plants underneath these panels. So that's going to serve multiple purposes. One is that it will provide this ecological resource here for pollinators to be able to find a food source and really try to boost the local ecology. These plants will also help to lock in the soil beneath these solar panels. So hopefully you get less erosion and healthier soil over the lifetime of this solar array. This is all fantastic. This is great for the city of Fitchburg. It's awesome to talk about. It's great to show pictures of. But still, as we all know, the municipality is one thing, spreading that solar message to the larger community is a much different beast. Now, in Fitchburg, I would imagine it's similar for all of you. Our broader community uses over 50 times more electricity than the municipality does. The broader community uses about 80 times more fossil fuels than the municipality does. So if you want to go to the next slide, Kathy. Thanks. Oh, sorry. This is also just one of the fun thing that we do with our solar panels, kind of getting this word out as we have links to some of the real-time solar generation of our roofs, but we can go past that one as well because I've already started my transition. What's an even bigger deal than getting this in your city is moving it out to the broader community. And so really what I want to talk about is this SolSmart program. It is funded through the Department of Energy's Solar Energy Technology Office. The two organizations that actually run this program are the International City and County Management Association and the Interstate Renewable Energy Council. So this partnership creates SolSmart. It is funded still for several more years. They've actually extended the funding multiple times. It's been an incredibly popular program. They're really pushing hard to try and spread this as far as they can around the country. Right now, there are 440 designees around the nation. 21 of those are in Wisconsin. As you can see, we are being beat by Minnesota and Illinois pretty handily. So we really got to get on that, catch up, and even surpass them would be fantastic. The two designees in Dane County right now are Madison, which is at gold SolSmart level, and Fitchburg, which is at bronze. Like a lot of other recognition programs, we pursue things like LEED designation on buildings. We pursue maybe bird-friendly city or tree city USA. We pursue bicycle-friendly community. All these kinds of designations that what they really are about doing is, one, providing a sort of a chance to broadcast our values to the community, a chance to try and really encourage residents and businesses to think about these things and to sort of serve as an example to others. That's no different with SolSmart. This is really, it's a national recognition program. It's something that you can put a plaque on. We actually have a plaque right here that you can stick on your building walls and kind of advertise to everyone that this is something you're putting effort into. It's really a great chance to spread that message. We haven't put it up yet because I'm still hoping we'll get to gold, and I want to wait until we get there to put this up on the walls. But with SolSmart, what you can also get is technical assistance. When you apply for SolSmart, when you begin going through this process, they provide you with a technical advisor, and they help you go through a lot of these steps that might otherwise cost additional staff time, that might cost additional money. So this is a money saver for the municipality. It makes it more efficient to push through some of these initiatives, but also fiscal savings for your broader community, really, because a lot of the things that go into the cost of solar is not just the hardware of the panels itself, the inverters, all of that. The soft costs actually are estimated to cost about 2/3 of the total solar installation right now. So we're talking about customer acquisition. We're looking at permit fees, the permitting process, other technical assistance. All of the non-hard materials costs actually roughly double the hardware costs right now. So this is pursuing a SolSmart designation also helps to streamline this process both for municipality and also for your residents to try to help cut down on those soft costs. So we can go to the next slide here. The SolSmart program breaks down their points into different categories, like a lot of these sorts of accreditations. Permitting and inspection, planning and zoning are two of the really big ones. This actually does change a little bit. They have thought about if you're with a municipality that doesn't actually have zoning ability on its own, they have a separate designation process for that. But for most of their applicants, these are two of the crucial areas, as you can see in the bronze designation. You have to get points in permitting, inspection, planning and zoning, and then you can look at the other special focus categories, looking at government operations, community engagement. How are you doing at really spreading this word out to your residents, getting them connected with shared solar, community solar, things like that. And then market development through things like creating maybe incentives for companies to create solar on their properties, maybe changing your construction codes to try and further incentivize the creation of solar within your municipality. So it's actually a relatively straightforward process. This began the spring before I arrived at Fitchburg, so I haven't personally gone through this process myself, but have been in a lot of discussions with our technical advisor since I've started trying to get us to push to gold. You can see that the top level goal there is 200 points, and then you also have to achieve a certain number of specific benchmarks along the way. Fitchburg is at 265 right now, and we're at bronze. So really the difficulty is just making sure you check off those specific boxes. If you are really interested in pushing solar for your community, they make it very approachable. They work with you really well and help you to provide the resources needed. So we can see on the next slide sort of what Fitchburg has done. And the big thing is just providing resources for your residents in an easy to find place. And this is what we've done on our solar resources page. Is we've got links to a permitting checklist, easy access to building inspection, forms and fees, information on what your building solar potential might be. We provide a link to the state solar permitting guidelines, all these kinds of things, just really trying to make everything comprehensive and clear and in one easy to find location for our residents. And then probably can just go to the next slide. Yeah, so the last one here is just sort of what would the process look like. If you go to solsmart.org, it gives you this entire overview, but it really is a simple process going through the guide, speaking with the technical advisor, and then talking through. I would imagine most of the communities in this call are probably already meeting 40–50% of the bare minimum needed to get to a bronze designation. So really working with that technical advisor can streamline this and help you identify where you might have some additional areas of need to provide these resources for your residents, and really try to boost solar around your municipality, around Dane County, and get Wisconsin to pass Minnesota and Illinois on this SolSmart list. But yeah, that's all I've got. I'll pass it back to Kathy.
Awesome. Thank you, Phil. That was terrific. Yes, we want to pass Minnesota and Illinois at a minimum. I'm gonna, we're rounding in the end here. I want to share just a little bit about homeowner association covenants in Dane County, some work that's been happening in our office to make everybody aware of this. So to start with, want to make sure everyone knows that Wisconsin is a solar rights state. So we have state legislation that goes back to the 1990s that restricts a local government's ability to restrict access to solar or wind on a customer site. You know, there are only certain cases where local governments can restrict that. And then there is also a statute that says that other restrictions on platted land, i.e. homeowner covenants, cannot restrict access to solar or wind. And I raise this because last summer, a local real estate agent reached out to our office, and he said he had a client who wanted to build a new home in Dane County and was having trouble finding a lot where he could have solar on his roof. And, you know, my history is in energy efficiency. So I was like, well, there's no trouble. We're a solar rights state. He should be able to find a lot anywhere. Then I had one of our interns dig into this and look at existing covenants around Dane County. And this is what we found. So the darker red is more restrictive covenants. The things labeled 6 are covenants that actually say no solar allowed, just flat out. Now, let's be really clear. I am not a lawyer, and I am not authorized by the county to provide legal advice to local homeowner associations. What we can do, though, is share the information we found and share resources about what the law is and how it works. And we've done that now on a page of our website. We share this map, we share links to the statutes, and we share links to a number of entities who have interpreted these statutes. The reason I'm bringing this up here today, I want all of you to be aware of it, but I also think there's an opportunity for our local governments to make sure this problem doesn't get worse. When a local government approves a new subdivision, they have an opportunity to look at that HOA language as part of that approval process. And mostly I'm just pitching that when you're approving new subdivisions, you should look at what language is in there about solar, and you should work with your developers to be using language that's consistent with statute so that things don't start off down the wrong road here. You know, what we really want are, I think it's completely appropriate for an HOA to have design considerations in the same way that they might not want people to paint their house purple. They might want certain designs on those solar installations, but it's the no solar allowed that is problematic under state statute. So there's a link on the page to where we've got the map and the statutes and all the data. I also have an open offer to local governments because our intern did this amazing job and looked through all those HOA agreements. We do have an Excel list of subdivisions and what level of restrictions are in their HOAs. And I'm happy to share that with you if you want to investigate that further in your community. So that's my HOA covenant update. And then I'm going to turn things back to Stacy to say a little bit about the Madison group buy before we open it up for questions.
Yeah, so I'm excited to say that today we are officially kicking off the 2022 Madison season. So just a little background, the Madison program is started in 2016. Through the city of Madison, we partnered with Renew Wisconsin, who is a statewide nonprofit that advocates for renewable energy throughout our state, and they are the administrator of the program. We started with a residential group buy, which basically Renew goes out and does a RFP to select a solar developer and says, hey, if we get you 30 contracts, 30 rooftops, what's the lowest price for the best quality work that we could receive? And so we've been doing that program ever since. And so that's part of the press release today is kicking off that residential group buy. Again, this is a way to make it the easy button for residents to get solar on their rooftop. Madison program also has expanded to include business incentives. And so those can be layered on with the investment tax credit and accelerated depreciation to really make commercial installations very viable. And then also we have a grants program for nonprofits and affordable housing providers called the Backyard Solar Grants, which we have an application process usually towards the end of summer with selection in the fall. So with all those options and also with the support of Dane County, we want to encourage all communities across Dane County to utilize the Madison program and seek out the Renew Wisconsin as an organization to help promote solar in your community and educate folks on how to go solar. And so this program is available to everyone. And so if you have any questions, please let me know, or you can reach out to Renew directly.
Awesome. Thanks, Stacy. And just to reiterate that again, okay, while the business piece of Madison is only available to businesses in the city of Madison, the residential group buy is available to everyone in Dane County. We're as Dane County, we're providing a sponsorship to that program so that all of you can access it at no cost and bring it to your communities, because we know, and we've seen in the last year when we did this in 2021, that a number of smaller communities in Dane County did really well with the group buy. You know, solar is more contagious where you know your neighbors, and that can happen in a smaller community. So that's a great opportunity there. I think that is all of this. So I'm going to stop sharing because it's kind of nice to get to see people at some point. And if folks have questions for any of these, this was, in my view, just a really fantastic summary of some of what's going on in some of our communities and the things that folks are moving forward. What questions do people have for folks? And if I don't hear one, I probably will throw. One of the things that's really struck me in a number of the presentations is how opportunistic folks are about, like, and you know, if any other speaker wants to touch on that, I would welcome like more discussion on the opportunism around the work that your communities are doing. Anyone have anything they want to say about that? Otherwise, I have two questioners in the chat. Bob, it looks like you have a question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Kathy. Well done by everyone presenting this morning. A couple questions. When you put these solar arrays on rooftops, isn't that problematic when you have either roof repairs to do or roof replacements? I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. And also, what's the life expectancy when they're put on a roof, and what type of maintenance has to be done on these arrays? Thank you.
So I can at least kick that off really quickly. It definitely is a consideration. That's actually something that my wife and I are looking at with our new home. The home that we just bought is 35 years old. We figure the roof probably doesn't have more than 10 years left on it. And usually you anticipate at least a 20-year lifespan for these arrays. So, you know, definitely taking into account both the age of the roof, when is it possibly going to need to be replaced, but also the structural support of it. These solar arrays are not tremendously heavy, but it does add a good amount of weight onto your roof. And so you have to make sure that the roof is constructed in a way that it can handle that whole system. Yeah, both really good things to think about.
From the school district perspective, definitely, I mean, we just re-roofed our pool about 2 years ago, and we are thinking we have a window now to put solar on, because again, the roof length of 20-25 years and the solar panel length of about, you want to try to match those up as much as possible. So things you can do though is, you know, at least on commercial properties, make sure that you're looking at how your seams are put together. That rubber lasts a long time. It's just the seams and where it connects to the building, they need to be reinforced. And then the other thing that we have been doing is we put pads underneath the additional layer of rubber, basically underneath the concrete blocks for the racking system, just to provide an extra level of wear, just in case something were to wear through the original roof membrane.
And I would just add that as far as the maintenance goes, it's fairly low maintenance. You know, we have our own engineering operations crew that goes through, and I would say that there's once in a while an inverter that fails, and so you do have to kind of monitor to make sure that things are working as they should be, but it's fairly low maintenance.
One of the things that we all have to, oh, go ahead, Kelly.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, learn in this is you saw pictures with snow on the solar. All of the studies say it's okay to just let the snow melt off the solar, even though we have an urge to, like, we sort of want to think about the maintenance person who goes out there and cleans off the solar so we maximize our numbers. That really isn't, I mean, lots of good research out of Madison College and elsewhere that those numbers do not bear out. Just let the snow melt off the solar.
And especially if you're looking at ground mounted arrays, just learned this with the O'Brien array down in Fitchburg. The panels that they've put up that they're manufacturing now are bifacial. So both the front and back of the panel can actually absorb solar radiation. So when the sun bounces off the snow in the winter, hits the back of the panel, and that's going to increase absorption of solar radiation. Really cool technology to account for a lot of these.
Yeah, we have
Kelly, go ahead.
we have bifacial panels on our roof too, and one of the roofs is white, so it works really well. And then we hired a structural engineer to evaluate our city buildings, which was very helpful. We found that a couple of them probably wouldn't have been so great. We might take a couple of our buildings down in the next few years, so those weren't good candidates. But the structural engineering assessment was a few $1,000s for 3 buildings. And then we got a stamp on that. And then on the residential side, I know the Madison program works with a couple roofers so that you can have your roof evaluated at the same time. And if you do need a new roof, then they have that ready to go as part of the program as well, so that you don't have to figure out all these moving parts. They really help you through that process on a residential side.
And I'll add quickly for the operations and maintenance manual you'll receive from an installer, it actually specifically says do not clear the snow off because of the potential for damage, things of that nature. So it is counterintuitive. We don't have bifacial panels, but if you actually look at the monitoring, it is producing a slight amount. There's actually some electrons getting through that snowbank depending on how heavy it is. So it hurts to see that day where you're not producing. But maintenance is pretty low overall. I think your inverters are probably going to go out first. And if it's a string system, that's a lot of them connected with these different components that will die individually, but the system as a whole, we have never penetrated and don't intend to. So we ballast, which is basically putting a big heavy thing on the roof instead of drilling or penetrating. So that prevents leakage, because for our projects, they were done in parallel with these roof replacement opportunities. So that now you got a 30-year roof, about a 25-year system, and a 15-year inverter. So if you write into your procurement specs that you expect the performance to go down a little bit over time, but if one drops, then you're in the opportunity to just get a equipment replacement. But I personally would maybe not look at the penetration systems for some of that. I've heard stories about water damage and that sort of thing.
Awesome. Mel, you had a question about the Madison Green Power Trainee Program.
Yeah, Stacy, can you just give a little bit more background on like how that came to be and like who, like what the scope of it is maybe?
Sure, yeah. So I would say that, want to give props to our engineering operations team, and specifically Matt Parks, who's our master electrician, who's very passionate about solar. And he had previously done some education through the Midwest Renewable Energy Association. So MREA covers the Midwest, and they have a annual energy fair up in Custer, Wisconsin, and they have other Solar 101 classroom opportunities. And he had taught some of those courses and kind of wanted to bring his passion for solar and teaching to his job here at City of Madison. So he basically proposed this idea of doing some really intentional recruiting out in the community for folks who have zero experience with being an electrician or construction, but have a curiosity about solar and would like to learn. And so again, it's a very beginner 101. It's what we'd almost call a trainee or pre-apprenticeship program, where we, again, the intentional recruiting, we want to find folks out in the community who are underrepresented in the solar field. And so we're looking for, women, people of color to come and learn the trades of solar. So we take them from the classroom to learn about solar. We do help them through the design, the procurement, and then putting on a hard hat and climbing onto a roof and actually doing the installation, with the idea that they can leave that trainee program after 6 to 9 months and then go and seek out an apprenticeship program in the solar field. So we've been really fortunate to have lots of popularity. So for instance, I think our most recent recruitment, we had over 100 people for about 4 positions. So there is a lot of interest out there in our community to learn the trades. And again, this is going to just bolster this fast growing sector of for economic development and workforce development.
Installing solar is cool. These are cool things to do. Judd Blau had a question about like where to start. And I apologize, Judd, I can't remember which municipality you're from.
I'm with DeForest.
DeForest.
Right, I'm just jumping into this. I can throw my camera. I'm just jumping into learning about this and trying to get an idea, right? And it's really from a selfish standpoint. When I looked at my streetlight usage, I was like, God, we spend a lot of money every year on streetlight, or every month even on streetlights. And is there a way to offset that, right? As well as then just contributing back to the environment, right? And so we've got some rooftops that I thought. We also have some potential lands that are not prone for development, shall I say, right? They're kind of
Mhm.
locked in and
Mhm.
not likely to have anything go there. So it might make some sense to put that in. We're very forward in our how we do things with native plantings, right? So that also interests me, that this area we could do some native plantings. There's areas
right.
where you don't have to mow anymore. We could utilize that solar and native plantings. So I'm overwhelmed. There's so many variables and things so I think it was Midwest Renewable Energy was an association. Was that it?
Mhm.
I'll have to look into that. When you Google
Yeah.
solar, now everything comes up, right? And now anytime I go to YouTube, I've got solar advertising and other stuff. And I'm like, I don't need residential. I'm looking bigger. So
Yeah, I would say the MREA they are again this year going to have their summer fair in Custer. That's like a really nice place to like learn a lot in a day. You know, everyone who's doing this is in one place, and you know, the other thing I would say that might not have been clear. So you know, people talked about like the renewable energy rider and the solar on their roofs and the RECs. So you want to also think about which power you're trying to offset. So streetlights are used at night. The way MG&E's renewable energy rider works, it's matching load with load you're using while that solar is being produced, which is more akin to like having your own solar. So it might offset your building usage, but it's not sort of optimized to set off usage that happens when the sun isn't shining, where RECs would do that. In a smaller array, Andy talked about how sometimes the school produces more than it uses and it sells it to the grid, and then sometimes it's using, you know, that if you're under a 20 kW limit, you can sort of net that out with the utility in a relatively straightforward way. So there are like definitely pieces of that. And I mean, you know, it's my job to volunteer in moments like this and say, I'm happy to like set up a time to chat with you and sort of think about what you've got and where those options might be. And then likely volunteer all of these other amazing folks to go, oh, you should learn more about what Phil did or Scott did or Kelly did, because this is where everything is. And we are at time, so I want to be respectful. If you need to jump off, go ahead and jump off. We'll, yeah.
I'd really quickly circle that back around then to your first question, Kathy, about opportunism. There are so many opportunities, and kind of each of these municipalities, we're all pursuing different ones. We see one, we're like, oh, I want to push after that. Now it means that there are others we're not getting to for the time being. It's a limitation of your time, your attention, what your staffing is like. But a group like this then really helps to kind of make use of that scale. Don't necessarily go to Google first. You've got 15 people here that guaranteed 1 or 2 or 10 of them have looked into these things. So something like this SLC really helps to take advantage of some of those opportunities by sort of breaking down that initial barrier of research and whatever questions you may have.
That's a really good point, Phil. That's a great place for us to end. And again, it's always fair to email me and go, Kathy, I think some other community might be doing this. Who is that? I mean, normally I have some vague sense and I might send you to 2 places, but one of them will be amazing because as this illustrated, we've got really cool things going on in a lot of places. This is super exciting. With that, I'm going to close us. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. I'm going to figure out how to turn